We're going to continue our conversation, this very, very important conversation all week long. This is part of our KPRC2 initiative, Breaking Free. We started off our first 30 minutes with an amazing panel. We have amazing analysts and panels and experts that we're going to have throughout the next hour that we have left. And we want to begin with Amy Smith, Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council, also Angelic Setchell. Thank you so much for joining us with the Montrose Center, and Christina Allen, FamilyTime Counseling. Thank you all for first of all, what you do, and thank you all for taking your time to be here to talk about this very important topic.
You all are experts at this, but you're also members of our community. You know, we all know someone who has somehow struggled with some type of abuse, and we've spoken a lot about physical violence, but there are other types of domestic violence and abuse that I think we don't really talk about, or we don't think that because it's not physical, it's not necessarily worth getting help for, or it's not calling somebody. And I'm talking about financial abuse, emotional abuse. Tell us the difference, really. Like, what is emotional abuse? Like, how? Give us an example of what that would be like for our viewers out there.
Well, emotional abuse basically is you're fat, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're the worst mother
Insults,
ever.
humiliation.
Just totally. It's just like, you know, you can't do anything right, that you are constantly being told that you're less than, you're not as good, you know, you're wrong, you know, you're not important. And, you know, as we know, you know, the old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt.
Which is so untrue.
But words hurt worse than anything else. I mean, it's kind of like, I liken it to that paper cut that you get, then you look down and your finger should be like, you know, spurting out blood when you see there's nothing. That's kind of what it's like. And what we've often been told is that it's harder to recover from emotional abuse because there's no outward signs of it.
Yeah. Right, and sometimes you think, oh, it's not that bad because I'm not hurt, like physically hurt, you know.
Right.
But it's still, you have to validate that, and you can stop that and either go to counseling or you know. And that type of abuse is not only like from a spouse or a partner. That can be a parent, and that can be co-workers, you know. I feel like it's different levels, not just inside your home. Is that right?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think about often is that this term over the past few years that has come up a lot is gaslighting.
Yeah.
And if you really look at what gaslighting is, it's abuse. And I worry sometimes that people don't recognize it as abuse because of the you know, verbiage that's involved with it. But when someone is trying to convince you that it's all in your head, and they're trying to find out what are your triggers so that I can say the thing that's going to make you just,
or
you know,
control you.
Right, go over the edge, or what I know is going to really hurt you at your core, that is also a form of emotional abuse. And so when you think about, you know, the insults that you hear, we've actually had clients at FamilyTime that have told us, I would rather get slapped. I would rather get punched because my bruises will heal, but I always hear in my head those things that were said to me.
Yeah, Angelique at the Montrose Center, what are you seeing?
So some of the things that I would say that's really like the emotional are like, so serving the LGBT community is a little bit different in that a lot of times it can come from family, like you mentioned, or from their partner. They'll tell them, you know, there's something wrong with you because you're gay, or, you know, you're part of the community. You know, you need to go to church, you need medication, you know, there's something going on with you. If you weren't, you're sick, or, you know, I'm the only one that loves you and cares about you, no one else accepts you. And if they're not out yet, you know, they'll tell them, you know, I'm going to go tell your family, I'm going to go tell your church, I'm going to go tell your employer, I'm going to do all these things to ruin your life. And so it's, you know, they're not physically touching them, but in a lot of ways it's like, you're going to, you know, completely destroy my life if you out me. And then a lot of times they look to them as that's their only person they have. If their family already knows they're gay and they've kicked them out, that person's the only person for them. So it's like, what else do I do other than kind of take this? Because if not, I'm going to be on the street, you know, homeless or by myself. And
what type of help or resources are out there in our community for this type of abuse? It seems to be extremely common, you know, especially if it's not just inside your house, it's also, you know, external. What type of resources are there in the community? Like, what should people do if they're experiencing this?
So one of the things that I would say I would encourage people to do is to reach out to one of the agencies that provides direct services, because often what you find is that through counseling, whether that's group counseling, support groups, you know, peer support, or individual counseling, or as you mentioned, even any combination of family counseling, you can really get to the core of what is at the root of some of those behaviors. And so that's always a place that we start, because we know that people need to be mentally healthy just like they need to be physically healthy.
It can escalate into physical.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right? If it's not taken care of.
Right, absolutely.
Now, you mentioned signs and things to look for. I'm very cognizant of the fact that at least right now, this half hour, I'm the only male at this table. I also have a wife and 4 daughters. And so the sad fact is the vast majority of victims in domestic abuse, domestic violence are women. So we talk about signs and what to look for. Talk about how important it is to start teaching our young girls as early as what age do you think to what to look out for, the signs to watch, and what to stay away from in terms of relationships that could draw them into an abusive relationship.
One of the things we do at the Coordinating Council is I facilitate the Adult Violent Death Review team, and we review domestic violence homicides. And one of the things that we discovered when we're reviewing these cases is that a lot of folks don't understand that they're in a domestic violence relationship, because that's the only relationship they've ever known. That's what they grew up with. That's what they have continued on with. So it's really important to talk about healthy relationships, talk about what is a healthy relationship, and to start as young as possible.
And boundaries.
And boundaries, talk about, you know, healthy conflict, communication, and what are your boundaries, because that's really important, and not just your boundaries on your finances, on spending time with family and friends, what your sexual boundaries are, everything, and take that into consideration. If someone blows past your boundaries, that's a red flag. Right. If someone starts to isolate you from your friends and family, that's a red flag. And so it's important, you know, if someone wants your password to your social media accounts, you know, that's a red flag as well. You know, if you're constantly getting text messages, you know, like controlling. Like, you know, where are you? You know, why aren't you home yet? You know, who are you talking to? Who are you with? Red flag. A constant like barrage of text messages, you know. Like,
I got another question over here. I hope you don't mind me butting in.
Right.
So.
Yes. Yeah. Jason.
Yeah. Sorry to butt in here, but I think this is going along with your topic. We just got a question from a guy who says, "I'm a guy who has been hit by a woman before. I didn't want to report her, but I knew I needed out. I had a cop help me. Does this happen to other men?"
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And we know that it does happen to men, and one of the reasons that it's not reported that much is because there's shame in it. You know. But yeah, please help him answer
We've
that question.
done several interviews. We'll try to get our producers to kind of cue those up for us in a minute. But first, like, is this something that you're seeing in your organizations, is abuse between whether it's a male partner or whether it's women abusing men, like this person who just sent us this text message?
Absolutely. I will say it happens to men, and it happens to men probably more than any of us know because of the underreporting, right? And I think we can't have that conversation without talking about the social norms and the cultural reasons why men feel ashamed, embarrassed, often to come forward and say, I am being abused, because all of those masculinity stereotypes and the ideologies that people have tell men from a very young age as boys that you're supposed to be tough, and you don't let a girl beat you up. And so then often those men have come from households where they witnessed abuse as a young child, and they often have been abused by someone themselves. And so they get into these relationships, and because most law enforcement officials are still men, there's an embarrassment with even calling the police and having another man show up to your home and having to explain that I'm the victim, right? But we do have men who come to our shelter. Our shelter is open to men, and we have had men who have gone through our counseling programs, and you know, they have always left and said, I want to take my success story and share it with other men and let them know you don't have to stay in that situation, and you don't have to be ashamed or embarrassed.
Yeah, Angelic, and the Montrose Center, you know, talk about from that your perspective there when it was male and male domestic abuse.
Yeah, so obviously, like we talked about, like the shame, the guilt that comes from the part of being LGBT as well, but also the shame and guilt of like, oh, I'm another man. You know, a lot of times, you know, unfortunately, police go out and they're like, well, you're another man. Why don't you just fight him back? and not understanding that even with a man and woman or a man and man, that's a power control dynamic, you know. So it doesn't matter if, you know, one is 6'5" and 200 and some pounds, and the other one's, you know, 4'9" and, you know, 110 soaking wet. The 110-pound could be, you know, beating up the tall, bigger person, and it's that power and control, that person that is, you know, controlling the relationship, controlling that person, and breaking them down and doing all the emotional abuse and financial and, you know, physical, all those things. And so it can really break down somebody and manipulate them and make them feel like they're less than. And so a lot of that shame and guilt is there. And so it's like, well, how do I go forward and tell people? And then if I do call the police, or have in the past, it's made it worse. I get re-victimized and those kinds of things happen. And so it's like, what do I do then? Or where do I go?
Right. This week, we one of our reporters did a whole story on men being abused. And we heard of one that talked about the embarrassment, and we heard about another one who was actually physically hurt, like cut with a knife. So I'm gonna ask my producer, Erica, to roll those 2 interviews for us so we can hear what they have to say.
I won't even say kind of. It is embarrassing to just be, you know, singing a song about what's going on in your household, especially between a relationship between you and a woman. I was cut by a knife with a knife. I actually literally had a camera on, and she tried to run me over with a car.
But what we really try to navigate with them is that violence can happen to anyone, all genders, all races.
It is very, very obvious when we talk to them that we understand what they're saying and what they're going through.
The text that we got from Jason's text there, and from what we've heard in the stories that we've run, obviously it is something that is happening to men, and men kind of need to put the masculinity thing to the side and speak up if they are victims of abuse.
And also too, you know, most boys are taught you can't hit a girl,
Right.
And so, you know, that has a lot to do with it as well. Is that, you know,
defending
not
themselves or not wanting to do anything about it.
Right. Exactly.
There was this one interview, and I think it was that same gentleman, where he talked about that he was abused by his mom, and his mother was abusive, and so he
was used to it.
He was used to it, so he took that abuse from his partner, and she like cut him. I think he was cut
with a knife.
With a knife, and so he realized at that point, like, I'm just accepting it because I lived it. Like that's what I. That's what I did.
That goes back to healthy relationships, to know what a healthy relationship is, because that's just
identifying
that's just what is normal. For
Question over here.
Okay, Andrea, yes, please.
Hey. We know a lot of times people worry about what is next after they leave. This question, is there free or reduced cost legal representation for domestic violence survivors who are going through divorce and custody issues so they don't lose their children to their abusers?
Yeah, if you have a more advantage or the breadwinner, then you maybe have a little bit more legal services and those resources. So what can people do if they don't have the money necessarily to fight and attempt to keep their children in custody, in these custody battles?
The court system can be really, really overwhelming, especially if you're coming from an abusive relationship. That just adds to the stress that you're already dealing with.
There are several legal services agencies here in Harris County. There's AVDA, Aid to Victims of Domestic Abuse. There's the Texas Advocacy Project, who I think is going to be on your next panel.
I believe so.
And then there is Texas, there's Lone Star Legal Aid. So there's a lot of different, there's Houston Volunteer Lawyers. So there's a lot of different, depending on the situation, there's a lot of different places that are available to
financial help
for, well, just reduce costs, not reduce costs for their legal representation. And if you would like to get a protective order, there's no cost for getting a protective order.
Okay.
And so also, you know, we're very fortunate that we have so much community support as agencies. So we have a lot of supporters who are attorneys, top-notch family law attorneys that say, I will donate X number of hours per year to your agency. So when we get certain cases and we think this is one that we need to, you know, send to that attorney, and they do it on a pro bono basis just because they want to help and they recognize that everyone cannot afford that good legal representation. And they also know, you know, what it's like. If you walk into that courtroom and you're going up against your abuser who has really strong representation and you don't, that's an uphill battle most of the time. And also, to your point about re-traumatizing the survivor, it can be very intimidating and traumatizing to have to even go through that court system and that experience legally. So we often rely on our partners too, who just, you know, help us because they know they have the skills and the talent. they know how to navigate the system, and they want to give back.
It's like being re-victimized.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let me ask you this. Sometimes we will see abuse and maybe our friends don't necessarily, or family don't want to talk about it because they're ashamed or they're scared, or family. If we are witnessing it or we see it, like what is the best way to approach that person and ask them, offer them help or offer them support without, because you know they're hiding it, you know it's happening, and they may not want to be open about it. Like what are the right words to say when you think it's time to speak up?
Well, I think some of it is are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? I believe you. I'm here to support you.
I think that I believe you is great, because if you ask someone if they're okay, they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm good, everything's great, like that. But this I believe you thing, I think, validates what they're feeling, right, and what they're going through,
enduring,
what they're going through.
And what we do know is that, you know, if someone asks, a lot of times someone will open up because they want to talk about it. They don't want to be the first person to approach and to bring it up. But they want to make sure, you want to make sure that, you know, and you can ask, are you safe? You know, I have some resources that are available. You know, I will go with you to the court. I will go with you. I will be there with you. We'll go through this process with you.
We mentioned the court system just a second ago. Let's talk real quick about holding abusers or perpetrators accountable. We actually have Erica. We have sound with a woman that we heard from just earlier today who wanted to make sure that her ex was held accountable. Can you roll that for us, please?
I knew at that point that I was my best advocate, and if I wanted him to be held accountable, I was going to have to be a squeaky wheel. I did all my research, basically was a legal assistant.
Okay, she made sure, she showed up to all of his court appearances. He would try to go and get his probation altered, have his charges dropped, and she made sure she showed up so they would see that there was an actual human being who was on the other side of it. How important is that to take those steps?
Well, it's important that survivors are not just a number, that they're not a checklist.
It's just a case number.
They're real people, and you know, it's a shame that domestic violence survivors have to push for and have to advocate for themselves. There are tons of agencies that have legal advocates that will be more than happy to help as well. But you know, I always tell survivors, introduce yourself to the prosecutor, introduce yourself to the probation officer. Call and introduce yourself, because let them know you're not just another case, you're not just another nameless victim, that you have a story, and your story is important, and your story is unique to you, and you need to get that across.
I want to remind our viewers that we are receiving text messages right now. You'll see a number at the bottom of your screen. You can text us any question that you may have, and we will ask our experts here, try to answer your questions. They have a lot of resources, and we have some of our producers over there who are getting some of those text messages. Do you have some new ones for us? Okay.
Right now, actually, and I think you guys are striking a really good chord right now, because our question just came in was, many people don't even know or even want to get involved to make domestic violence stop. How should someone go about getting involved? So I think it's a good conversation.
Yeah, and I guess from different angles. Could that be from someone who's actually on the inside of it? Could that be a neighbor? Could that be a family member? What are the first steps that need to be taken?
So I think there's a couple of ways that you could actually answer that question. So if it's someone that you know personally, I think it goes back to the point that was made earlier, asking questions and keeping the focus on the person that you believe or you know to be the one being abused. To say, I'm concerned about you, and I want to know, you know, if there's something I can do to help. Asking questions, not so much giving advice or not saying, I think you should leave, because we know that that often puts that person who's being abused in a situation to where they feel like you're trying to take away their right to make decisions about their own life. But expressing the concern, it may take more than one conversation. It often does. Yeah. It takes survivors on average 7 times before they leave for good. And so we know that this is not necessarily the first time you mention it. Someone will say, you know what, yes, I'm being abused, I'm ready to leave, and it's cut and dry. I think being realistic about that.
And sometimes the hardest part is for the abuser to recognize and say, okay, this is a problem, you know, because they're so used to enduring it, for them to actually acknowledge it, I think, is a huge step. I want to remind also everybody watching that I know our experts are giving a lot of information, and their resources, their organization, of all the panelists and all the resources that you may have, that you need. It's on a QR code. Just look at your screen and grab your camera if you can't write any of this down, and just hold up your camera to this QR code, and it'll take you straight to our website where you can see all of the resources, and there's a lot of answers there for you. Houston is so lucky to have just great organizations like the ones you're in and representing. So there is help for everyone. The first step you have to do is what? Is just recognize and make that call, right?
And what we like to say is to recognize, respond, and to refer. So like you recognize everything. Also, just one really quick point is just to make sure, to answer this question, is just to make sure that you're safe. Because when an abuser, when someone is getting ready to leave, that is like actually the most dangerous time for a victim, because if you think about it, the abuser's losing their power and control, and they're losing the power and control over their victim. So it's really important to make sure that you're safe and that the survivor is safe. So just make sure that you are concerned about your safety as well, because we do know abusers could injure other folks as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there are dangers in leaving, unfortunately.
Our producers are waving us over there.
Or Andrea, yes, please.
Hey, y'all. We have another question here. What is trauma bonding? How do I know if this is me?
What, trauma bonding?
Bonding.
What is trauma bonding? Okay, I don't think I've heard of that one. Can you, trauma bonding?
Have you heard of that? Trauma bonding? Maybe it's something like you're used to.
You bond with the person who's traumatizing
or
you?
you feel sorry for them, like you don't want to get them in trouble. Like what have you heard in your industry?
A lot of times, like especially like with our community, they go through a lot, you know, being part of the LGBT community, you know, they both have similar stories, you know, their families have been mistreated them, and they've you know, gone through some adversities, and you maybe have been bullied, and so you tend to relate and associate, you know, yourself with that person and see yourself inside that other person, and so it's hard, you know, you bond through your trauma, and so it's hard for you to see, like, okay, this person is abusing me and doing things that I don't deserve. But you tend to feel sorry for them and understand, you know, where they're coming from and what's going on. So you're kind of in that thing, well, we can work to fix each other, we can help each other, you know, kind of all that codependency stuff that goes along with trauma bonding. And so it's really hard to kind of separate sometimes. And so you have to like be able, like we talked about earlier, those boundaries, those healthy relationships. What does that look like? Is this healthy? You know, am I stressing out all the time? Am I feeling like I have to hide things from my family, my coworkers? You know, all those kinds of things. What's impacting me, my mental health, my physical health, all those things going on. And if you tend to see yourself, you know, having a lot of difficulties in those areas, so then maybe you are experiencing those trauma bonding things, and you have to be able to maintain those boundaries and be able to make a decision like, what is best for my life, and you know, can I move on and move away from this person?
I did see a story, Heath, sorry, about someone being abused, saying, well, they were abused, and so this is part of their story, and almost, you know, not excusing them and saying because they were physically abused, that's all they know, and that's why they're doing that to me. Therefore, it's okay, we're getting them help. But at one point, do you say they need professional help? I can't be the only one that's helping you. You need like outside help.
Yeah, it almost, I don't know if this is the exact definition of trauma bonding, but it almost sounds like that syndrome in World War II where people would start to sympathize with their
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, Stockholm syndrome. Yes, there you go.
Yes.
So you start to sympathize with the person who is actually abusing you. And as Daniela said, you're thinking, well, wow, they went through a lot of abuse themselves, and so I understand it, I'm going to get them through it. But staying in a relationship like that is not worth it.
They need professional help. Yeah.
Well, and also, I would like to the person that wrote this question, if you are concerned about it, and how do you know if this is me, reach out. Reach out. There's y'all have tons of resources listed on the QR code. So just reach out and talk to somebody, because I really think that is your best option.
To help them identify if this is something they can help.
If you're worried or concerned about this, reach out and get some help.
And you know, it's interesting, we saw a phenomenon during COVID with our survivors, and many of them, particularly those who came to our shelter, would come to the shelter, and after a while they would say, you know, I've been thinking, I think I'm gonna leave and go back. My abuser lost his job during COVID. He got COVID and he had to be quarantined and he had to miss, you know, his brother's 30th birthday party, you know, and there was a lot of the sympathizing that happened. We also saw some interesting things happening, if you remember, when the COVID relief checks were given out to people. And a lot of abusers reached out and said, oh, I'm better now because I have some financial relief, and that's what was making me be abusive. So why don't you come back and let's give it another try. And you know, we always give our clients the opportunity to make their own choices, and what we say is we're always here. If you ever need to come back to us, we're here. But we give them, you know, that opportunity to make their decisions. But we saw a lot of that, and it was a lot of empathy and a lot of sympathy during COVID, because the stress of the pandemic was why the abuser was being abusive.
But it also sounds like it's going back to that manipulation and control that that's ultimately at the center of this.
So common. Well, Amy, Angelique, Christina, thank you so much for joining us and for all of the incredible information. And again, just scan that QR code. You will be able to find information on their organizations and all the resources in Houston. We've had some difficult conversations, but really important ones. And so we are grateful for allowing us to do that with you.
And thank you for what you do every single day for this community.
And we're just grateful that y'all took the time out this week to do this, because it's very important, and we are very thankful that y'all are shining a light on it, because it's needed. So thank you very much for doing this. We really appreciate that.
We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
We'll take a break, right?
We will be right back.